Okay, we're going to move on to our first inspirational talk. This comes from Jason Roberts, and it's called Building Better Communities from the Bottom Up. Jason is the founder of the Better Block project. His work in helping create neighborhoods has become an international movement, which received a Champions of Change award from the US White House. In this talk, he's going to look at how we can drive change in our communities from a grassroots level, taking a very DIY approach to stimulating action. We'll also be taking questions on the app, so please make sure you submit them throughout his talk. Please give a very warm round of applause to Jason Roberts.
All right. See if I can just cue this up here. So my name's Jason Roberts. I'm from Dallas, Texas. Thank you. I got some Dallas folks out here. Oh, good. I head up an organization called the Better Block. We are working in communities around the world to help rapidly transform spaces, bring places back to life again and things like that. But the thing is, my early inspiration was kind of looking at places that weren't working anymore. This is like my mom's town where she grew up. This is in Fletcher, Oklahoma, which is the middle of the US, like 800 people. And if you go to the US, many of our small towns in the rural areas look just like this. They're main streets that are closed up. They're wide streets, but they built highways, and when they built those highways, they built these big department stores, and life kind of died in these old main street areas. But my mom would tell me stories about how they used to have parades in these spaces, how they would celebrate life together. This is where everyone came together. Like the local store owners knew everybody, they knew the shop, they knew the kids in the area. Kids couldn't do anything wrong because they were always being watched. And so a lot of my early work was trying to figure out, how do you bring the life back to these places? How do you make these places come back on again? But the problem was, since I wasn't an urban planner or an architect, I was your computer guy. So this is where I spent most of my days, kind of changing out wires and cables and servers. In fact, I would have been setting up all this projection unit and all. And at nighttime, I played in rock bands. So I was really not the guy you would ever call in order to help kind of fix your city. But some other inspiration for me was also getting a chance to travel and seeing great places that were very old, that had been working for a long time. So I remember going to Paris first and seeing this space and thinking like, man, this is gorgeous. It's hundreds of years old. I wish this was in my neighborhood. If it was there, I would go there every single day for a cup of coffee. I'd want to like retire in this area. I'd ask friends about this space and say, what do you think about places like this? And they said, man, we wish we had this in our neighborhood as well. We'd put this on postcards. We want our kids to work here one day. And I thought, well, if we all collectively wish we had more places that look like this, then why do we keep building places that look like this? And that was the early idea behind our work, was this: we know that the places that we create responses from us. They make us feel good, they make us feel bad, they make us feel like we want to celebrate as a community, or they can make us feel like commodities. We're just coming here to just do a transaction only and leave. So I decided to start going to the city and thinking like, well, how can I make change? How can I help? I went to the City Hall in Dallas and said, I want to get involved. And they said, well, first of all, in Dallas, it's hot. So 3 months out of the year, it's 40 degrees Celsius. And then we also have a car culture, so you're never going to get people out of their cars. But if you want to get involved, we have these planning initiatives. We have all these plans. You can get involved with the Forward Dallas plan. We have the Downtown Dallas 360 plans. We've got bike plans from the 1980s and the recent ones that have never gotten built. Maybe you can pull those out and work on those. Or you can work on the 2035 mobility plan. So I saw this and thought, well, Dallas is going to be great in 2035. I hope I can make it. So I started thinking, well, I can't get involved with the city because it's going to take too long. Why don't I work on projects that were in my own neighborhood that I can take on? The problem, though, with my neighborhood was it was considered historically as the bad part of town. It has had a stigma for nearly a century. And a lot of that stigma came from the fact that we had some bad folks that came from our neighborhood. So first of all, this neighborhood's called Oak Cliff. We had Bonnie and Clyde are from my neighborhood, but also Lee Harvey Oswald. In fact, this theater was kind of ground zero for why we were perceived as the bad part of town. This is called the Texas Theater. At the time when I wanted to start getting involved, this theater had been closed down for a decade. In fact, the only reason it had a sign was because Oliver Stone made that sign for the movie JFK. So I saw that theater. I started meeting the board that was working on the space. And they said, we need millions of dollars to fix it up, but we don't have philanthropy coming into the area. And so I thought, well, I don't have $1 million either. So what can I do? Maybe I can get involved with my friends. I'll get my arts community together. And so we got together and said, why don't we have 100 people in our neighborhood come out to the theater? And we'll give them all canvases, have them paint together one night. And the next night, we'll open up the theater and turn it into this instant art gallery. We'll open the doors again. So this is us inside the space, getting the space ready. And then minutes before we're about to open the doors, we're thinking, man, this could be an abject failure. Because first of all, the theater had been closed for a decade. It was the middle of winter, and we're on the bad side of town. But when we opened the doors, we had 700 people show up. And we sold every piece of art we had created the night before. But beyond that, people came up to me afterwards and said, we've been waiting for someone to open the doors to the theater. I thought, well, I was waiting for someone to open the doors of the theater as well. Like, we're all just waiting for someone to kind of stand up and kind of turn the lights on and allow us to use these spaces again. Now, if you go to the area, it's working well. This is an anchor for our community. It runs regular film festivals, and it's working. In fact, within 3 months, as I kept getting involved, I said I want to keep helping, and I became the president of the Texas Theater. So I tell people, be careful whenever you say you want to help, because they will throw the keys at you. But it's done a lot for our neighborhood, and it's been this complete rallying point for our community. So, drunk with enthusiasm and thinking if I can help bring back a theater in my neighborhood with our community, what else can we work on? I started looking at old maps in our neighborhood. This map is from 1929, and if you look at the top right, downtown Dallas is at the top right, and this is Oak Cliff here. And I started looking at these areas and started thinking about how did we used to be? How did this area used to work? And I realized we used to have a tram line or a streetcar that ran throughout our community. And so I looked at that and I thought, okay, that tram was very integral to how we actually developed. So one of the big things was the Texas Theater had 650 seats, but it only had 35 parking spaces. So the tram was how people were coming into the area. When we took that away, it actually created a lot of problems. So I started attending a lot of neighborhood meetings, and we talked about ideas on ways we can bring energy and things back to our community, and people had a lot of different ideas. And I said, I've got an idea. Why don't we bring back that tram? Bring back the trolley car system. People said, that's crazy. It's been gone for half a century. You can't bring back a tram. And I knew very little about trolleys, but since I was an IT guy, I knew how to make a website. So I went home that night and I made a fake website called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority that looked really official, had boards and newses and histories, and I had your European trams on the front as well. And the next week, our newspaper came out and did a story saying, dreaming of the day the streetcars return. That's what Jason Roberts and other members of the recently formed Oak Cliff Transit Authority are hoping. But there were no other members. It was just me. But I had people in my neighborhood call me and said, we got a transit authority, this is great. And I thought, well, no, but I'd like to see if we can get this involved, how we get this up and running again. So it turns out I had a guy in my neighborhood who was a civil engineer who said, I will donate time, 100 hours pro bono to doing a feasibility study. I had another guy in my neighborhood who was 80 years old who had enough parts in his garage to build a trolley car. So we had this interesting army of folks together that we could gather. So while this is going on, we started thinking, okay, this is going to take us a long time to bring back the trolley car. What else can we work on? And after looking around the world and seeing all these new developments happen, we saw a lot of great things happening around bike infrastructure. And so we thought, well, why don't we start getting some bike infrastructure in our neighborhood? But the problem was, when we talked about bicycling in the US, it wasn't like I saw here in Europe, where you have girls in dresses and guys in suits riding their old heavy bicycles. When we bicycled in Dallas, and the way we promoted bicycling was we'd all get in spandex, we'd start doping, and we'd go 300 miles. Like, that's how we bicycled. So I thought, well, how do we create a group, and we'll get together and we'll call it Bike Friendly Oak Cliff. We'll kind of rally around this idea of take out your old heavy Schwinn from the garage, and we'll all go out together to like the post office and to like the grocery store together. And I found out, as a leader of this organization, when I started going to City Hall and saying, I've got this great idea, I want to take all of our roads, I'm going to cut them in half and put bike lanes everywhere, you'll have a lot of people that look like this that come out and say, no, you won't. So I realized, okay, it's going to be really tricky for me to get this guy to ride a bicycle. So we'll have to figure out some other approach so we can get people into this idea. So we said, well, why don't we just start getting people to ride together for fun? Why don't we do just these history tours? We'll go out and we'll celebrate, following the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald, because we didn't have a lot to celebrate in our neighborhood. And so we gathered this idea up. We said, we're going to promote this ride. We said, meet us at the grassy knoll, because that's where you're going to meet for a JFK ride. And we thought maybe if we're lucky, there'll be 20 people show up, because, who's into this idea of riding old heavy bikes in hot Dallas? But whenever I showed up to the grassy knoll and saw what was there, I saw 150 people, actually, that were all excited about this idea. And so this picture is taken, actually, us crossing the bridge and going into my neighborhood. So what you don't see is me at the front of this line looking terrified, because first of all, I didn't own a bicycle when we started Bike-Friendly Oak Cliff. I just love the idea of having a bike culture. But I also thought, I am not the leader of a movement. I don't need to be leading anything. I'm your IT guy. But I found if you're passionate about something, you have everything it takes to become a leader. And everyone in our community was waiting for someone to stand up and say, look, there's a problem. There are other ways to do things. There's other things happening around the world. Why don't we try something different? And so I started trying to figure out what are other ways we can help build bike culture in our neighborhood. What are easy, simple ways? So one of the first things I found was my kids' school. No kids were riding bicycles at all, none whatsoever. In fact, there were not even bike racks. And when I was a kid, everybody rode bikes to school. So I thought, well, why don't we go out and I'll get punch cards to the kids. And I said, every day, if you ride every day for 5 days, for a week, we'll punch the card, and at the end of a week, we'll all go out and get root beer floats together. At the beginning of the week, we had maybe 4 or 5 kids riding. By the 5th day, we had 100 kids come out and start riding. So we realized that we could easily kind of transform these spaces and build these bike cultures and build cultures based on these simple ways of getting people together and having them have fun together. All right, so I was looking at trolley cars, I was working on the theater, and also working on bike projects. I started looking at the blocks of buildings in my neighborhoods and trying to figure out, well, why aren't these working? And I realized we did a lot to hurt these spaces over time. So first of all, in the 1970s, we changed the roads to one-way high-speed streets. We thinned the sidewalks. We got rid of the landscaping. And we changed the zoning from retail to light industrial. And then we created all these laws and rules, and don't read all this, but just know that we had rules that said if you want flowers on the sidewalk, it was going to be $1,000 in permitting. If you wanted to have awnings over the windows, $1,000 per awning. Street cafes was going to be $1,000 times market rate area value times 85% times 12%. I have no idea what that is. And then we also had laws that if you really want to kill your street life that say people are not allowed to gather on the sidewalk. And all of those rules were from 1941. So when I asked the city and city staff, why do we have these rules? They're like, we don't know. They've just been on the books for a long time. You have to follow these rules. We looked at our blocks in our neighborhood and we said, well, obviously it's illegal for us to do anything to make these places come back to life. So what would happen if we took a weekend and we broke every law we possibly could? So that's what we did. We just went in and we painted our own bike lanes. We thinned the streets ourselves. We added our own cafe seating. We brought our own historic lights out. We took the empty buildings. We put the businesses we always wanted to have in our neighborhood. We put bookstores and coffee shops and flower shops. And then we printed off every one of those laws and rules we're breaking. We put in the windows and we said, everybody come out to our better block. We invited our city staff and our mayor. And they came out and they were like, I don't know if we're supposed to be here. And we're thinking, man, we're all going to go to jail. But the amazing thing was people saw this and said, this works much better. We'd much rather have places like this. This makes far more sense in our community. And we started seeing a lot of rules change after this. We started seeing the zoning rules change. So now we are no longer light industrial, back to retail in these little pockets. And we also saw all those fees get reduced. So instead of being $1,000 for cafe seating, now it's $100. So it's a lot easier. People said, that's great, but you did it when it was spring. It's nice outside. But remember, in Dallas, it gets really hot. So I said, okay, let's try it again in the middle of summer. We'll take another street in our area, and we'll say it has the similar problems. I mean, there's no sidewalks on one side, broken up sidewalks on the other side. There's a pole with nothing on it, just grayness and kind of empty buildings. And thought, how do we make this cool this down and make this a humane space for people? So we came out with our neighbors in the middle of the night. We brought out 42 trees. Brought out 100 bushes to create pedestrian islands so cars would go slower in the area and people would feel safe crossing the streets. We painted our own crosswalks. We put bicycles on that pole because we weren't really the bike part of town. We just kept telling people we were, and it's funny how it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then lastly, we put tables under the trees, and people came out and they would not leave. So we found that there was this easy way for people to experience something and have a feeling and say, this makes sense. We need more places like this. These people all became, in my neighborhood, became instant urbanists. They got it all immediately. And the thing is, I show this picture often. This is what the block looked like at the end. We had seen so many architects and consultants come into our neighborhood giving us renderings and models and watercolors that never got built. So we said, we don't believe these anymore. We had rendering fatigue. So the amazing thing is we just took the time and energy it takes to draw pictures, and we just built it ourselves. Those aren't Photoshop trees. Those are real trees. Those aren't Photoshop bicycles. Those are real bicycles from our neighborhood, real crosswalks that we made. So one of the big initiatives that we found that was important for our community, which was before I forget, people also ask me, what happens when we break all those laws and rules? This is my friend Scott, who helped me identify the laws and rules we're breaking. Scott's now our city council member. So I found there's a one-to-one correlation between breaking laws and becoming a public servant. All right, well, we also found that it was important for us to work fast. The community has ideas, they want to do things, but they start going through the bureaucracy, and then they realize it's going to take us years and millions of dollars, so we're just going to give up. We had a group that wanted to do a dog park, and they talked to the city, and they said, it's going to take us, do after these environmental studies, and we need 3 years, and we need lots of acreage of land. And we didn't have that. The group came to me, and they said, well, what would you guys do? And we're standing across this field in our neighborhood that was small, and people were throwing trash in. And I said, well, why don't we use this and show people how we can turn this into a dog park and make it like a temporary test. And they said, that's great. This group, they're like, we'll get together, we'll raise some money. After a few months, we'll have some meetings, and we'll try to test out a dog park. And I said, well, why don't we just do it next weekend? So that's all we did. We just went in and we just copied the official City of Dallas park signs, and we made our own park signs. We found that it wasn't actually that hard to make a dog park. If you know how to make a fence, you can make a dog park. And then we started making them more for people than less than for dogs. So we found that would get people out more. So we put swings out for kids and kiosks, so you could buy dog treats and coffee. So one of the other big concepts for us was kind of taking the City of Dallas's motto, which is think big, and kind of turning it upside down on its head. Because we found whenever we think big as a city, what that happens is that we're gonna go out and we're gonna hire an Italian architect who's gonna design a $150 million bridge that looks like a fish skeleton that we hope is gonna make 100 little things happen. But the amazing thing is the places that we love in the world, whether it's here in Barcelona, it's in London, it's in New York, it's in New Orleans, it's in Johannesburg, wherever it is, there are all these little blocks that we go to all the time that have coffee shops and flower shops and bookstores and great sidewalks and benches. And as a community, we can make 100 little things a lot faster than that one big thing that we hope makes 100 little things. We found we can use lots of tools at the store to make this happen. So we can use white duct tape because it looks just like the paint that cities use to paint stripes on the ground. We can go in and we can take trash cans from the dollar stores and we can turn them into planters. And then we can take the scraps of graphics on the city buses that are left over and we make crosswalks. And then we can say, look, these roads are too big and too fast. We need to fix this one intersection. They'll say it's going to take us years and all these studies. And we'll say, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it on Saturday. We'll fix it ourselves. And the amazing thing is now we've gotten hired by cities. It started as this kind of guerrilla activist movement, but our cities come in, look at these, and they say, well, this actually works well. You engage the community, you go out, you try out an idea, you get to watch it, you get real data, and we can apply this work afterwards. People also ask me, how do you get away with breaking all those laws and rules in broad daylight? I found you can break any rule you want as long as you wear an orange vest. So, all right. All right, so now since our work has been sanctioned, I'm going to give an example of a project that we have now, and this is how we do most of our work. We go into a lot of places. This is in Akron, Ohio, that suffers from major depopulation. They have empty buildings, these wide spaces, these streets that are overbuilt. And we're asked, well, how do you fix places like this? So what we have to do is we always start with the people. We go find the people in the neighborhood on the ground, and we start asking who lives here, what is missing, what is making this place not work anymore, and what can we do to start transforming things rapidly, not in 30 years, but in 30 days. And so we'll make maps with the neighborhood. We'll identify all the empty buildings, the empty spaces. In this community, we had Bhutanese refugees. So we said, let's see what kind of businesses they want to start. We had a lady that wanted to do a restaurant, so we started a Bhutanese restaurant. We'll try to go in and create a cafe, because there's an Italian community as well that was living there. So we'll do a cafe. We'll create an artist space. We'll create an international welcoming center, because there's refugees moving into the neighborhood as well. And so we gather that up. We start filling up the city's official machines with kids' finger paint. We go and take white duct tape, and we work with the kids in the neighborhood, and we stripe those. And then within 2 hours, we can have a functioning bike lane that looks just like the ones we see in other places around the world. We can then go in and take the empty lots. These were empty for 50 years. Just take some dirt and take some hay bales and some volunteers, and we can study kind of classic plazas. And within 2 hours, we can make our own Italian plaza in the neighborhood. We can also go in and take the turn lanes for the cars and make bocce ball courts. We can go take the pallets from the trash and make decks and teach people how they can actually build things with this leftovers in the neighborhood. This is an intersection that we just used finger paint and we used white duct tape. This was a bank that had been empty for 10 years, and the city looked at this and said, what can we do? This is a wide street. We don't know how to make this a desirable space. We just took old tires in the neighborhood and paint and made a great plaza for the community. And this is the neighborhood actually using the space. So just a few hours before, the people that were in this bike lane were actually helping us make this. And they had no idea that they could ever have a place like this in their community. They never believed this was possible. They thought this happens in Portland and Austin, but not in Akron, Ohio. We don't see those things here. And we can prove this over and over again and get people a chance to say, like, there is a way to do things better. And once they can show that there's another idea and there's another way to do things, they can actually get a toehold to make permanent change. This is a grocery store that we worked on in Denton, Texas. Once it emptied, there were people said, how do we fix this? We went in and just took old billboard vinyl and took a scaffolding and made it into a little main street. So people could show how you can actually use this space, make it small again, so people can kind of start a lot of little businesses in the area. And now you go to our website, betterblock.org, and you can actually see a lot of the information that we have that we do in cities all over, and you can take these ideas and use them in your own city. So we have recipes. This is our green bike lane recipe you can download. We have plaza recipes. We've got bocce court recipes. We also have gotten pretty heavily involved with digital fabrication. So I've gone back into like my IT roots. This is our office in our neighborhood. We started realizing there has to be more tools we can use to help people transform their communities. And we learned, well, first of all, kids know how to model things. They model things through games and through free software online. They can model their cities. We can teach them how to do this and start making 3D models. And with those 3D models, they can make enhancements as well. But we also realized we can take this equipment called CNC routers, which we have at our office, which is basically just imagine a giant printer for wood. You can cut out these shapes, and when you cut out these shapes, you can actually make these interesting things when you puzzle piece them together. This was inspired by a group called WikiHouse that was designing houses that you can actually cut out of with these machines with just plywood and assemble these things with no glue, screws, or nails. So we created a library called WikiBlock. It's on our website. You can actually go to this and download all of these designs for free. They're open source to make public space furniture. So we've got all this is just some of the seating that you can download, simple benches that you can bake, simple chairs. What happens is you put the sheet of wood on the machine, you download the file, you have it start cutting, you can go out have a cup of coffee and come back 45 minutes later, you can actually start assembling a cafe seating set. So there's no glue, screw, or nails in that. This is a coffee kiosk that we've designed that people can assemble so they can start fixing the public spaces and create kiosks and create merchants in these areas that can have eyes in these spaces and take care of the benches and chairs and the trash. This is the coffee shop being used. There are tables and chairs. This is benches with kids in St. Paul, Minnesota, that we teach them how to fix their parks. This is a bus stop we designed, easy to assemble for a community. This is in Tallahassee, Florida. We made a greenhouse with community garden boxes you can download. And this is, we just did this actually 2 weeks ago. This is our stadium seating you can download, so you can actually create theaters in your area, in your neighborhood. And then we'll go to kids' schools, and we'll teach them how they can download the files and modify them themselves. This is in our city in South Dallas. This is us teaching the kids how they take these files and build their own benches and fix their own courtyards. This is a community in Ohio, teaching them how they can make cafe seating, and this is them using those spaces. And in Austin, there was a child that was hit by a car because the streets were too wide and too fast. So we had designed actually a series of bulb outs and pedestrian islands that the neighborhood could take and download and install in the street to show how you can fix it. And so the community could see these things working again. And that Better Block project that I started, back in 2010, really just because I wanted to have a coffee shop and a bike lane in my neighborhood, started getting really popular and started going all around the country because we open sourced the idea. I said, look, people started asking me, how do I do this? I said, look, I work on computers for a living, so I can't help, but here's how you can do this in your own community. And then the next year it started going around the world. It went all the way from Melbourne, Australia to Tehran, Iran. When I tell people, the people in Tehran, Iran called me and asked about breaking laws, I was like, I don't know about breaking laws in Tehran, Iran. The stakes might be a little higher. All right, I'm going to end with a streetcar story, see what happened with this. So this is my little team. We had a couple other members as well on our board, visiting Portland, looking at their trolley car systems and trying to figure out how do you do this? How do you bring them back? They had brought back their tram. It took them 15 years. They said it's going to take a long time. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. So we gathered our team together. We went back to our home, and we called the city of Dallas and said, hey, we want to start applying for some grants to see if we can bring back our tram. And they laughed, and they said, okay, Oak Cliff Transit Authority, apply for all the grants you want. We found one grant called the Tiger Grant. It was the first year they ever did it. And we had a 0.3% chance of getting any money whatsoever. But what happened was we won millions of dollars. And instead of taking 15 years to bring back that tram, we brought it back in 5 years. And all I did was build a website. So I tell people it's amazing what you can do. You can take what a dedicated group of amateurs can do in a community, because we don't know what we're not supposed to not be able to do. So we can transform places rapidly. So if you go to you go along now this trolley car line, along the spine of this, dotted throughout this, you'll see cranes again in our neighborhood. You'll see dense development coming back in these areas that were empty fields before. Like this. We started finding out other ways to make things happen quickly, so we started a restaurant with our friends and neighbors as well. We started getting a lot of attention for the work. I got to lecture at Harvard. I got to have dinner with Michelle Obama. I decided to run for a U.S. Congress because I had a free April. We got in the Venice Biennale, so we thought, what can stop us? We found these great ways to make lots of things happen in our community quick. But the one thing that completely stopped me was in 2012, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And then everything stopped. At that point, I remember thinking, well, what's all this for? I'm not going to get to see my kids grow up. I'm not going to get to ride this trolley car we helped bring back. I'm not going to get to, try out these businesses that we're creating. And when I was at my sickest and needed all kinds of help, the neighbors I had gathered in our community to help do these better blocks started knocking on my door and started taking my daughter to go shopping. They started taking my son to go fishing. And then when I was at my sickest, they started doing these campaigns to help build a better Jason, to fix me. So I tell people what I got out of all of this work with Better Blocks was not streetcars, not businesses, not any of that. What I got was a neighborhood. And that's why we're doing all of the work. We're doing all the smart city stuff that you hear, all the things that are happening, whether it's involved with policy or law or economics. It's all about creating great neighborhoods so we can feel safe, so we can thrive, so our kids can do well, so we can age in place, so we can have our parents feel like they're taken care of. And before I forget, in 2014, I was diagnosed as being cancer-free, so I'll be just fine. Thank you. Thank you. All right, my 3 quick rules on how you make things happen now. So, because we did a lot in a short amount of time in our community. So first of all, I said you have to show up. If you don't show up, he will, and he's opposed to everything. So I joined every club, everything, the Kiwanis, Lions clubs, chambers of commerces. Second of all, you've got to give your idea a name. So we created this great designs, and we had bike-friendly Oak Cliff, and we had Oak Cliff Transit Authority. So people could take these ideas, and they could actually help us broadcast them. So they took this and said, we're part of this great group in our neighborhood. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is we call it blackmailing ourselves into action. We set these short dates, and then we start publishing what we're going to do. So what that does is it forces us to make things happen. In fact, we don't do a long date. Don't say I'm going to do something in 12 months, because you're going to come up with every worst case scenario to talk yourself out of doing something. We'll set 90-day time frames, and we'll spend the first 2 weeks making the poster as good as we possibly can. Then we'll publish it everywhere, and we'll announce, hey, we're going to do this Better Block project, and people say, that's great. How are you going to pull that off? And we're like, I have no idea. But the amazing thing is people will start contacting me in my neighborhood and say, look, I know how to work with textiles. And somebody else will call and say, I know how to work with wood. And somebody else will call and say, I know how to work with food. And we start assembling and fixing neighborhoods based on the people that live in the communities and the skills that they have. And with those 3 things, I found you can pretty much fix everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. We have got time for a couple of questions, if you'd be up for answering them. Do you want to take a seat over here, just so we're not awkwardly stood at the side? And that truly was inspirational. Some people have got in contact over the app. And one of the ones there, as you mentioned during your talk, they were worried about what happens when you do actually break the law. So Anna says, did you ever get fined for breaking the laws, or have failed attempts of no one coming? And how did you handle that?
No, fortunately, knock on wood, I've not been thrown in jail. What we found in a lot of the neighborhoods that we work in, they're so distressed and they're suffering so bad that oftentimes the law and the police forces were coming in saying, look, we're dealing with gunfire and major violence in the area. If you're out here painting a bike lane, that's low on our priority list. And when the community started saying hey, this is working and making places better and people are coming together, the politicians started getting behind it because it became a populist movement as well. So, if you tried it in a affluent neighborhood, maybe you're right. I know I speak all over the world, and I know when I speak in Germany, the Germans are the most scared of this idea of breaking laws, so I totally get that. But yeah, that's just, and we've been sanctioned now, so we actually get asked to go in, and we'll do these projects, and we'll have the city come out and say, now, tell us every rule and law where we're breaking now so we can identify what needs to change afterwards.
Yeah, it's a good way of identifying what does need change. Have we got any questions that you'd just like to ask through the old-fashioned method of putting your hand up? Yes, a lady here. Now, I think there is a mic that you need to head down to. Sorry, you innocently put your hand up there and now I've made you move. Oh, yeah, just stand there. Thank you.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for your inspiring talk.
Thank you.
Has the municipality changed his behavior in the sense that when you find some rules that have to change, for sure it's the government or the urban planning who has to change at the end? Have they?
I will say the plans that you saw, like the Forward Dallas and Downtown 360 plans, have been adopted, but the public areas take longer to change. The private realm changes faster. The businesses can kind of come in and things like that. I found the public realm, in order to get that to change, you have to have a continued pressure from an activist on the outside. Otherwise, and I guess the politicians want to make these changes as well, oftentimes. But as soon as city staff gets somebody comes out and says they're opposed, everyone gets really nervous. And so if the activists aren't coming up and saying, we're going to continue fighting and having your back on this, then you'll see these initiatives fade and drop. So it's tricky. It requires just constant kind of touch points in pushing the ball forward.
Another question from the app says, great projects, but how do you ensure the maintenance and security of these places you create if you don't have the city's buy-in?
Great question. Well, first of all, these projects are all done temporarily. So we'll just go in like on a weekend and transform the space. And then we'll take everything out afterwards. So the goal for our work really is to identify what is wrong, what is the capacity in the community to actually do things, and then what are options for us to make change. So we'll get into the idea of sustainability and maintenance after we've started identifying who are the champions that are for the, when we put the trees out in the street, we have people in the neighborhood come up and say, I love landscaping, I would love to take care of this. And we can identify a way to maintain those things. And someone else will say, I love the bike infrastructure or bike group. And so we start working with them to identify methods for sustainability and maintaining those things. So it's an ongoing process.
Any other questions from the floor that we can end with? No? Is that everything? Well, on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much. It was a brilliant talk and really, really inspiring. Round of applause for Jason, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.